Welcome to today's webinar, From Classroom to Cafeteria, Actions to Reduce School Food Waste. For the second year in a row, we're excited to partner with WWF's Food Waste Warriors program to host this timely conversation during the back-to-school season. I know some have headed back this week, some are heading back next week, and some have headed back weeks ago. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Nate Clark, and I'm the Communications and Content Manager here at ReFed. For those of you not familiar with ReFed, we are a US-based nonprofit that partners with food businesses, funders, solution providers, policymakers, and more to help solve food waste. It's a problem that costs all of us a lot of money and has enormous negative impacts on both our planet and our communities. ReFed's goal is to increase adoption of food waste solutions. And one way that we do that is through events and webinars like this, which can help inform the work that all of you out there are doing. Before we get into the conversation, I want to share a few quick ReFed announcements. Coming up on October 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, you're invited to join a virtual town hall about the U.S. Food Waste Pact, the joint initiative we co-lead with World Wildlife Fund to help businesses accelerate progress towards their food waste reduction targets. The pact brings together food businesses and organizations to collect and analyze data about food waste in their operations, share best practices through pre-competitive working groups, and pilot and scale solutions through intervention projects. This webinar will provide a broad overview of the PAC's work for organizations, for those organizations who are interested in getting involved. And you can register for this event in the link we've shared in the chat. Next, I just want to remind everyone about the 2025 ReFed US Food Waste Report. This is our annual look at what's going on in the food waste space, including our latest estimates on the extent and impact of food waste in the US, plus explorations of what's happening in food waste funding, solutions and innovation, policy, and much more. This year, the report we released in February was our inaugural report, and we will release it in the first half of every year moving forward. We really hope it will become a valuable resource for you in understanding the progress being made in the fight against food waste and where things stand now. You can access the report at the link in the chat. Our last announcement, on May 19th through 21st of next year, we will be bringing our Food Waste Solutions Summit to Charlotte, North Carolina. It's the premier food waste event of the year, bringing together hundreds of thought leaders, decision makers, advocates, and more for 3 days of insights, inspiration, and action. You'll leave with actionable takeaways that can drive progress in your work. And this is a new announcement. We'll be opening early bird ticket sales on October 1st of 2025. So October 1st. So make sure you're signed up for our mailing list so you can be the first to know when registration is open. So now let's dive into today's content. Every year, school cafeterias serve over 4 billion meals, and with that comes a staggering 530,000 tons of uneaten food, costing schools more than $1.7 billion. But schools are powerful hubs for change, and across the country, leaders are stepping up to address cafeteria food waste. And I'm thrilled today to be joined by 4 amazing organizations driving this progress on the ground, including our co-host World Wildlife Fund and their Food Waste Warriors program. In a minute, I'll pass the mic to WWF's Mary Jane Chandler to set the stage for our presenters. But before I do, I wanted to highlight who you'll be hearing from today. From Clean Memphis, we have Michelle Cowan and Leanne Edwards. Clean Memphis drives environmental sustainability by turning intention into action through hands-on education, waste reduction initiatives, and collaborative partnerships that transform waste into resources, building a cleaner, more resilient Memphis for all. From Towards Zero Waste, we have Megan Haller. Towards Zero Waste is a nonprofit organization based in Wake County, North Carolina, that is dedicated to promoting waste-conscious living through inspiration, education, and action. Towards Zero Waste entered the food recovery arena in schools after identifying a need in the local school district and wanting to support passionate people in working towards a more scalable solution. And from Last Mile Food Rescue, we have Eric Hayden and Ellen Stedfeld. Last Mile Food Rescue is dedicated to ending food insecurity and waste by rescuing excess desirable food for those who need it most. Volunteers, called Food Rescue Heroes, use a mobile app to pick up food donations and deliver it to partner agencies who get it to those in need. Since 2020, over 15 million pounds of food have been rescued, providing over 12.5 million meals to their community and preventing 42 million pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions at landfills. And leading our conversation today will be Mary Jane Chandler, Program Officer for Food Loss and Waste at World Wildlife Fund. Take it away, Mary Jane.
Thanks, Nate. And hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for joining today's conversation. We're really excited for everything that we have in store for today. For the next slide, please. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm Mary Jane Chandler, the Food Waste Warriors Program Officer at World Wildlife Fund. Food Waste Warriors is our K-12 school initiative where we partner with groups nationwide to support them with turning their cafeterias into classrooms. A lot of those groups of who you'll hear from today. Next slide, please. One of my favorite things to say about Food Waste Warriors is that we may have a very playful name, which I love, but our mission is quite ambitious and impactful. And I think a big reason for that is, when we zoom out and we really stand on that balcony level, as Nate also shared earlier, more than 30% of all the food grown is going to waste, and 530,000 tons of that is coming from school cafeterias, based on our estimations. This makes schools both a contributor, but also a significant player in the positive impact that they can have. And everyone that we're hearing from today, all of these organizations coming from Ohio to Tennessee to North Carolina, are really joining this movement with groups all across the US that vary geographically. They share differences in their school environment, their school district environments, and the resources they have available. And this has all really kind of shaped their approach of how they're aiming to reduce their food waste. At the same time of those differences, they all share very similar challenges when it comes to generating that buy-in, building community support, building out their resources, navigating, what may seem like food safety guidelines and reimbursement guidelines and challenges. And today we're really building out this conversation to kind of unveil that myth that, it's too hard to get started, and that me alone, I can't make a difference, because you absolutely can. And we're not only here to really spread that awareness and share these really exciting stories, but also just really want to emphasize that we're here to support, your journey wherever you might be in this whole movement to really reduce food waste in the school space, but also beyond that. Students, staff, partners, anyone can really kind of make a difference in that. Next slide, please. So just to share for a quick minute on Food Waste Warriors, since we started in 2019, we've established programs in over 600 schools across 31 states. Our approach is really geared towards empowering students and communities to reduce food waste and help to really drive that long-term systems change. Through some of our efforts, we've seen about a 14.5% reduction in food waste in participating elementary schools, and then a 12.4% reduction in milk waste. I know that we're going to hear some really awesome numbers today coming from our organization, so really excited for that, and keep an ear out and an eye out to hear about the amazing work that they're doing. The last thing that I'll say is, what I love the most about this work is that it goes beyond the scope of food waste. As our food systems connect to other critical issues like plastic pollution, broader climate action, engaging youth, education, and wildlife conservation, all of which is really kind of built into these efforts. And so each presenter today is a community partner that's leading this work on the ground and open to sharing their stories and their efforts, highlighting how they've kickstarted their programs, how they've scaled, how they've begun to really build that momentum outward. And now I'm super excited to introduce Clean Memphis, close partners of ours presenting on their exciting work in Memphis-Shelby County schools. And with that, I'll pass it over to Michelle and Leanne.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Cowan. I'm the Director of Education and Community Impact for Clean Memphis, and I'm here with my colleague, Leanne. We'd like to share with you today, we're excited to share with you today our journey into food waste in our elementary schools, primarily in Memphis, Tennessee, and some of the lessons that we've learned along the way. Next slide, please. Clean Memphis is a partner for environmental progress, and one of our main partners in our community is our schools. And that's certainly my role, is connection with those schools. Next slide. So just to give you a background, Memphis Shelby County Schools does participate in the community eligibility program, so that every student does receive free or reduced free lunch at our schools. And our district is a close partner of ours. We're an education organization, so Clean Memphis educators were in schools already doing environmental science, hands-on education. And so when our food waste interest came around that 2019 time, our executive director built a relationship with nutrition services director so that they could be partners from the start in our food waste journey. Our first food waste audit was in 2019 in the fall, and we were scheduled to do more just as the pandemic shut us down. Our concentration in the food waste audits was hands-on for the students, as well as data collection and trying to figure out what was the potential for share table food in our schools. By developing and working in our schools every day, our organization built a lot of trust and engagement with our nutrition services team, as well as administrators, principals, and teachers throughout the school system. Next slide, please. To gain support, we early identified barriers. So we had a vision of what we wanted to see, and then we quickly understood from our director of nutrition services what some of those barriers were. For example, their nutrition service staff leaves right after lunch is served, and so extending the share table meant that there needed to be someone other than nutrition services staff to monitor and kind of gauge that, be in charge of the collection, storage, and distribution of the share table food. And that was one of our first ways that we tried to overcome the barriers. We showed our audit results to menu planners and making sure on our audits were done a little bit differently. So in Memphis, since we have such a close partnership with the menu planners and the administration of nutrition services, we do our audits by menu item rather than by fruit, vegetable, protein. And that was a little more informative to them so that they can make decisions based on that. And again, we went through our principles and used our teachers and students to activate our food waste work. Next slide.
Michelle is not kidding about the partnership with nutrition services, because at that 2019 time, I actually was one of the nutrition services team and was so amazed at this work. That's a big reason that I'm sitting here now with her. And of course, we're in a very different place now than we were back in 2019. We have several more schools being active in this. Our educators have expanded their curriculum to include these annual food waste audits at the schools where they're teaching. And the students, like Michelle said, lead those audits. So it really assigns value to food, and the students help each other rather than adults telling students what they should be doing. As we do these audits, we see tremendous amounts of sealed food and really milk. I know most of us on the call here understand that milk is a really big problem, specifically milk waste. And there should be very little reason why you're getting sealed milk still available for a share table. So we wanted to attack that through prevention strategies as well. So we moved upstream and started doing offer versus serve education with the students and the adults. And that's really key, having all the people in the room at the same time to hear the same story. So students feel empowered to decline items that they will not enjoy. And regulatory within this, we had to address that, make sure that we were subject matter experts in teaching those students and staff what offer versus serve means, how they can build meals that are both nutritious and reimbursable. And then those logistical barriers, we brought on a monitor for those share tables. And that was part of our funding solution was being able to pay stipends to our monitors while we ran these pilots. And you see our monitors there and our students involved. Next slide, please. We had a lot of great results to show, and Michelle will show you a little of that in the next slide. We could bring impact directly back to the schools and show how we're aligning with their academic standards and their nutrition goals. And then when we were working with nutrition services, because we're attacking the prevention side as well, we can show them an immediate cost savings. And of course, to the students, we're improving access to that nutritious food. And we're not talking about it as donating food to students to help with food insecurity. This is helping their community, helping their environment. They have a role in making their school a better place. Next slide, please.
Here's some data from just one of our schools. After our comprehensive education program, meaning a full school assembly, we also have deep education going at this, but in this school, but the education intervention I'm speaking of is what Leanne was talking about. It's a full school assembly with all teachers, administrators in the room, as well as the addition of the share table. Before the share table, this one school had over 100 unopened milks at the audit at the end of the lunch period, and over 50 pieces of whole fruit that would have been perfectly fine. At that time, they were discarded after being counted. But after our share table, not only has our reduction, you see that's enormous reduction. We have only 9 milks unopened at the end of the lunch service and only 2 pieces of whole fruit that are left over, and none of those gets thrown away. All of that gets shared with students by the end of the day. And that is it for us. We are handing over to Megan with Towards Zero Waste. Megan?
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. So with young children in the public school system, myself in Wake County, I was working with our PTA and eventually other PTAs with my Towards Zero Waste hat on to implement composting programs in the cafeteria. And we have about 9 schools or so in our district that are doing some level of organics diversion. But it was actually a parent contact at one of those schools with me that asked me back in 2023 if I knew anything about food recovery in our schools. And at the time, I had to tell her honestly that I didn't know anything. But since I was in the schools quite a bit and with all the composting initiatives, I certainly saw the volume of the unopened foods that were going into the trash. Next slide, please. It was a podcast about food recovery in Guilford County, North Carolina, that really sparked my interest. And I took the concept to our executive director at Towards Zero Waste, Kathleen Leibowitz. Now, Towards Zero Waste is not a traditional food recovery organization. We focus on education and advocacy. But Kathleen encouraged me to research food recovery in schools, and specifically in our county in North Carolina. Next slide. With Towards Zero Waste work in the composting space, we were already using data to support composting initiatives in our schools. A waste composition study conducted by our county government in 2023 showed that nearly half of our elementary schools' waste was compostable, 30% of that being food waste. But when we went back to that same study with a food recovery mindset this time, we saw that the contractors had noted the abundance of unopened single-serving food packets, so fruits and vegetables and other foods. Next slide. Additionally, Wake County Public Schools does have a large percentage of children receiving free and reduced meals. And we know that number doesn't capture the fluctuations in food insecurity in our community. So before we even began to get into what was possible in North Carolina with all of this information, we knew that a food recovery program could have a significant impact on food waste as well as food insecurity. Next slide. In late 2023, we contacted A Simple Gesture in Greensboro, North Carolina, and to learn more about their program, we actually went and were able to look at one of their elementary schools. From there, we researched other food recovery programs across the country and learned from their experiences. We met with any community stakeholder that we could to find potential supporters, and we wanted to get as much information as we could without having to reinvent the wheel. In all honesty, we were hoping to find a community partner to work with us. We're a very small nonprofit. We're all volunteer run. But at the time, we didn't find any other organization to jump on board, so we kept persevering. Not long after our initial research, we were able to meet with one of our Wake County Board of Education members, Sam Hershey, and he has been an incredible proponent of sustainability in our schools. He was fully on board with our work and helped propel us forward on a number of occasions. We really couldn't have gotten the SHARE program where it is today in Wake County without him. In August of 2024, Mr. Hershey helped us meet with our superintendent of the school system, Dr. Robert Taylor, who was on board as well from the very beginning. And we were even able to engage with our senior director of child nutrition services, Paula DeLuca, who has since retired. After connecting with the food security program manager through our county cooperative extension, we were offered the opportunity to have an AmeriCorps Vista working with us for a year, helping to build our program. And so that extra pair of hands was certainly critical to the project. All of this helped us in designing the program guidelines that have shaped our SHARE food recovery program in Wake County, and we built on some of our favorite components from programs across the country. We took advantage of contacts we already had in Wake County Public Schools to help us review our ideas and plans for the program. It was really important to us that we create a viable program for our school district. And so with our current program, we're able to recover items in 4 categories, which are packaged foods, whole fruit, cold foods, and condiments and utensils. Funding, of course, was our next hurdle, and our executive director was able to secure enough from a local source, the Lonnie and Carol Poole Family Foundation, to cover an initial pilot. So our schools started hearing about the program we were building, and within a month, we were able to find 8 elementary schools able to participate in the pilot program for us. And so with all of that background, that information in hand, we were able to go to our school board's facilities committee meeting this past February and came out with an agreement to move forward with Toward Zero Waste running a pilot program for a year in our school district. Next slide. Once our paperwork was signed with the district in early March, we were able to launch at our first school the very next day. And after that, the remaining 7 schools launched every other day. So positive news coverage from that Board of Education meeting and our early school launches really helped increase the conversation in our community. And that led to additional schools contacting us for more information. Before the launches, we worked hard with each pilot school to connect with their PTA. We knew that parent involvement would be, if not critical, at least extremely beneficial to the long-term success of our programs. Parent and community volunteers helped us with data collection. We certainly didn't want to burden school staff with any additional work on top of everything they were being asked to take on with the SHARE program. Next slide. Our goal was to collect data from each school daily to see what food items were being donated and when they were being consumed by students later at the school. But that ended up being a little bit lofty in terms of the volunteers we were able to secure. But we were able to get a decent amount of data from each school to give us an overall picture. Next slide. Across the board, our data, and we had small pilots, elementary schools in our study, and we had larger schools as well. But that data suggested that at the elementary level, we're looking at just over 40 food items being donated per day per school, which for a 180-day instructional year could mean over 7,300 items per school. And you'll have to note that in North Carolina, we're limited on what food items we can recover. We cannot recover time and temperature control for safety foods. So that number, that 40 food items, is probably pretty low compared to other states, but for us, that's a huge gain. What we also confirmed is that students are consuming the donated food almost immediately, either during meals, during snack time, after or before school, and only one of our pilot schools was having a consistent surplus of all things shelf-stable hummus. But we did work with all of our community partners, our community food pantries, to connect our pilot schools with one so that if we had a school that had a surplus of food, we would be able to donate that outside of the school. But again, only one school needed that in our first 8. So next slide. With our early data from the spring, we were able to go back to that same foundation and ask for funds to help with a pilot program expansion. So in early June, we heard that that request was approved. And additionally, we started a community fundraiser for our SHARE program, and we've received some exciting donations. All of that is going to help us expand to 10 additional schools for this 2025-26 school year. We actually just launched at another one yesterday, and that number includes 4 middle schools now. So the total will be going up to 18 as part of our pilot program. We've also been offered staff support each week by the Environmental Services Division within Wake County government, which again is a huge gain for our program. We're going to be utilizing these hours to enhance our education and outreach, as well as focus on program management for our phase 1 pilot schools. Next slide. We continue to hear from interested schools. I heard from one just this morning, and we already have 8 on that list for a future round 3 of program launches. I've been invited to participate and present to our district's school social workers staff meeting and later in September, and then also to our county commissioners education committee in October. So we are hoping, a longer term goal to be able to offer this program to any interested school within Wake County. We're hoping to continue collaborating with other school districts that are looking to develop similar food recovery programs. And given our limitations in North Carolina, we also are working and beginning to work with other stakeholders in the state to advocate at the state level for an expansion of our food code interpretation. So that is all from Towards Zero Waste. And I will turn it over to Eric and Ellen with the Last Mile Food Rescue.
Thank you so much. So, we, in building our relationships with our school districts here in Cincinnati, again, I think a lot of you have touched on this. There was some apprehension from the school districts to kind of let us in and begin working with them. The real thing that turned the tide for us was we were actually able to deliver some food to Cincinnati Public Schools. We were able to deliver a large load of apples right around a back to school a couple of years ago, and kind of got some social media buzz around it and really kind of built that level of trust that, hey, we're all in this to do the same thing. We want to feed kids. And so, understanding what the school district's needs were around food waste and what they were doing to mitigate it already, like everybody said, through the shared table programs, we wanted to understand how we could supplement that. And the first way that we found was to kind of help them at scale at the warehouse level. If they have short dated product or unused inventory, we were able to go to the student dining warehouse and rescue with one of our trucks larger loads of product. As that trust was built over time, we then were able to understand, what are your other needs of food waste? Like, how can we help you guys prevent food waste outside of just the share table program? So then we realized, after talking to the different cafeteria managers, that their largest upticks in waste were happening around seasonal and holiday closures. So we really put together a network and a program with the student dining leadership of reaching out to schools and setting up a rescue process the day before or 2 days before schools would go on to holiday, the winter or summer break. And so we were finding that through that program, we were able to get, at one school location, you might get 30 cases of milk at one time. Because with kids, the attendance dropping off right before closures, and the ordering practices maybe not being as tight as they could be, this was their largest amount of waste. So we put together a network through our volunteers and our fleet drivers of these large scale hitting, 20, 30, 40 schools at a time. And so when we were able to prove to them that we could show up and do what we said we were going to do, again, the trust was built and we could get a deeper relationship with not only Cincinnati Public School District, but other neighboring school districts. So Cincinnati Public has 60 plus schools. We now work with about 6 other full districts that have anywhere from 20 to 10 schools in them. But every year we're growing in that. And the more that we can celebrate the wins, whether it's through social media, through traditional media, we are finding that more schools want to come in and work with us on this program. Now, how do we keep the momentum going and how do we further engage with these schools? Obviously, then we kind of reverse engineered, and now we are trying to see how we can support those share tables and support the education through our partnership with World Wildlife Foundation to kind of keep those relationships with momentum and keep them going into the future. And I can pass off to Ellen there on how we've done that.
Thanks, Eric. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So Eric mentioned we, as a food rescue organization, that's our starting point. That's what we do best, is we are good at the food rescue. So reaching out to those schools, those districts, picking up food, redistributing food is what we do. So that was an easy starting point for us, and just figuring out how we modify what we typically do on a food rescue to fit a school's needs was our starting point. But we weren't quite satisfied with just doing what we normally do, because we know schools have such potential for community impact and spreading awareness. So we started off thinking really big, because schools have such potential. Where do we start? Do we do PTAs? Do we have after school clubs? We had a million ideas, and it was really sort of narrowing down to who are some potential partners who are interested in our work, and where can we just start? We have a motto at Last Mile that's fast is better than perfect, meaning we just have to start somewhere, even if it's imperfect, learn from what we did, and keep growing. So you can see a few of our strategies here. Our marketing and PR doing some consistent emails to the school cafeteria managers, like Eric mentioned, to principals, to PTAs, to get the messaging out on all different levels, doing some direct outreach to schools, and engaging some of our volunteers as well who work on other rescues to say, hey, do you have a school or a child in a school? Could you help us build a relationship with that school or that district? Next slide, please. So we have our rescues from schools. We also, as Eric mentioned, distribute into schools, such as the Apple example he gave. But we also wanted to continue building through some curriculum ties as well. And so this past year, with the support of World Wildlife Fund, we were able to do some school engagements and speak to curriculum within schools. So we targeted 4 different schools. We hit elementary, middle, and high. And again, like our approaches, we sort of want to see what are the needs of the school, what is the need of the teacher, where can we fit into the curriculum in a really natural way. So we used the World Wildlife Food Waste Warrior program as our starting point and as our base. And in each school, we did something a little bit different. You can see the picture on the screen where it says compost it was with an elementary school, talking about, do you, with food, excess food at the end of the lunch period, do you save it for later? Do you compost it? Do you put it on the share table? Really getting that ingrained in their brain so that they're thinking about what they're doing and what their contribution is to food rescue and waste. With our middle school students, we did some learning about food rescue and waste, and they actually went out and tried to find us some additional partners. One of the partners they secured was their own cafeteria, bringing up some good points on what the benefits of food rescue are, and we're able to enroll them into our food rescue program. And then with high school students, there's an interest in what happens with the excess food. And so we partnered with schools to repackage excess food and deliver it to a food pantry where it can then be served to people in need. So they're really seeing what happens with rescued food going into the community and making a change. So we feel like this is important, an important layer to add to our work, because these are really the next generation. We want the next generation of students to grow up thinking food waste and recovery is as sensible as, recycling is. It feels like that's a very normal part of our everyday life. And how can we make this food rescue piece feel just as normal and mainstream as that? So next slide, please. And so I'm going to pass it back to Eric to talk a little bit about, again, that deepening engagement piece as we move forward.
Yeah. And so as we work with schools, and again, like everybody has kind of said a version of building up that trust, giving consistent feedback to the school, asking for feedback from them on how we can better support their goals seems to really continue to push this on. And we're seeing more and more returns all the time, from our schools. And, I think the biggest thing that we take away, like I said, is we're in this both for the same reason, to feed children and to move the needle on hunger. And if we can show that we are serving the communities where these schools are, where these children are when they're out of school or during school, that we all have an alignment there. And it's really been a wonderful thing because, a couple of years ago, there was no schools around here with any serious food donation program outside of within their four walls at the share tables. And now, like I said, we're onboarding full districts and keeping, thousands and thousands of pounds of food out of the landfill every time these schools shut down for breaks. And at that, I think we can pass it back to Mary Jane. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was so amazing. Thank you, everyone, for sharing all of those drops of wisdom. I feel like that came through and shined through all of your programming, and just really amazing insight. And the chat is absolutely exploding with questions and interest. So excited to dive deeper into that. And just as a quick note, after we share a little bit on resources, we'll go into a panel Q&A with all of our presenters today with a few questions that we've had at the ready. But also we're going to spend some time answering a few of the audience's questions. So please keep that engagement coming through the chat. We also have the Q&A function that we're really excited to dive into some of your curiosities. So with that, I just wanted to really quickly share some on WWF's resources that we have through the Food Waste Warriors. And thank you, Ellen, for doing a shout out to using that in your programming. We have designed kind of a full toolkit of educational curriculum for K through 12 schools nationwide to be implemented. They're free of charge. They are standards aligned for educators and students. They're a mix of being community driven, research driven, and have real world impact built into them, and also designed to help engage and empower students to understand what their own voice is and understand, what's happening with the food system, and ask those questions through those experiential and hands-on learning opportunities. So next slide, please. That's just a little bit about the resources that we have available on our website. I also know that there were quite a few resources that were shared from each of our partners, and hoping we can dive into that during our audience Q&A. But just a quick flag, coming up in September and October, we will be launching a year 2 of our fall communications campaign. So just something to have on your radar if you're really hoping to get started right now and you want that to be maybe coming through that communication side, understanding, what's available, new resources to share out with your schools, with your principals, with your community partners. We have blog posts, teacher-led podcasts, teacher-led webinars coming out both in September and October, a series of videos to share to really engage your students, as well as a few new resources. Think a bingo game, a Kahoot quiz, a recycling relay, all to kind of add to our bigger toolkit of ways that we're trying to tailor the work that we're doing and that we're seeing all of our partners do to continue that engagement. As well as, excitingly, a postcard campaign that is really meant for students in the classroom to help build that support with their principals. So again, that'll be on our website, and please feel free to participate wherever you're able to and whatever you're interested in. Next slide, please. And this is just some quick contact information. I know that we've shared a lot today, that we're excited you're here, and we're really hoping to support you however we can. So check out our website, as well as all the presenters' websites today on their amazing work to see more on how you can get started if that's what you're interested in. Awesome. And with that, I'd love to jump into the panel Q&A. Thank you to all of our presenters for such an amazing series of presentations. Awesome. Welcome back. So in hearing all of your presentations today, I think what really stood out is you sharing around the different groups and stakeholders that you've looked to for buy-in to get that support, from parents to other community partners to the food nutrition services staff. And I guess I'm just curious to maybe kick it off of, do you have any, pieces of wisdom that you would maybe say to someone on how you really work to get that buy-in from leadership, depending on, which seemed the best fit from the parents, the community organizations, and if you would just like to share that with anyone today. And how about we get started with Leanne and Michelle?
So Michelle and I always talk about how approaching nutrition services has been so key for us. And they are very happy to talk about these issues if you come as a partner and not as a critic. There's lots of stigma around school food, and they hear enough of that. And so when we engage with them, there's a lot of let us help you figure out what's happening at the school level, and we'll give feedback and information to you, but we will never shout you out as how much food you're wasting and that sort of thing. So I think that is a really big piece of the engagement.
Also, I think that making sure you're partners and not just taking. So you're wanting something from someone. To be a partner, you have to give as well. So we made sure that we began our partnership by giving our district data that they did not have. And so that made us a valuable partner to them. And then they were more willing to do what we wanted because we had data to back up what we wanted, and we were willing to do that work. So being a good partner.
Yeah, I love that, being a good partner. And I would love to touch more on kind of that data piece as well later on. But I'd also love to hear maybe from Ellen and Eric next at Last Mile Food Rescue, just any kind of pieces of wisdom that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said, that to be a partner and not come in there and go, hey, you have a problem and we're going to fix this. It's something we're going to do together. And again, we built that ally in the school system through the athletic director by delivering fresh produce to students to go, hey, we're all on the same page here. We're here to help. And then that idea that there's going to be waste in the system, and that shouldn't be a dirty secret that food is going to be wasted and that the taxpayers aren't going to lose their minds. It's about having intention around that food waste. And then there's a win to celebrate. So it's not a negative connotation. And I really believe that we're able to get a truer picture to leadership at the school districts when we're picking up at multiple school locations and getting the data to provide to them that, hey, these are the amount of milks that were wasted or produce at each school, that now this message of, okay, next year we can use this data to order better, but it's through the guise of this was a win, not, oh, we threw all this food away. And so I think we've changed the tone around the conversation of how to better manage school food inventory.
And just to build off that, Eric is a great communicator. So building that initial relationship through maybe an in-person meeting, doing some follow-up data reporting like he was speaking to. We also have a newsletter that goes out. So there's continual conversation and touch points. It's not we only talk to you when we need something or there's a problem, but we're continuing to build the relationship.
Yeah, that's really great insight about that relationship leading to process and results. All right, Megan, bring us home.
Yeah, so in North Carolina, I feel like one of our biggest hurdles and what we had to really work through in the beginning and bring in that community support to really help propel us forward is that there's a history of and a precedent in North Carolina for a lot of programs that had gotten underway to be shut down for regulatory reasons. So a lot of our school districts, they were concerned about starting a program because there was a lot of confusion and misunderstanding around what was possible. And so it really took coming in with our data as well well, of looking at the percentage of food that was being wasted and technically recoverable from our cafeterias, and then comparing that, as we have, to the number of students that receive free and reduced meals, and our numbers of food insecurity in our community, to really be able to showcase that to our school board and our superintendent, and get them to allow us to look into the options and kind of push forward in that way. And for us too, our CNS, our cafeteria staff, is they're so maxed out, they're so limited on resources and on time and staff, that we knew getting going that we could not put more on them. And I think that was their initial reluctance, is that, oh, you guys are going to come in and ask us to do something new. And we just, they're already maxed out. And so we made it very clear from the get-go that we were planning to design a program that did not involve them. And that is what made it work for us. And that's how we got past that hurdle at the top in our school district. And then from there, schools want this. They really are excited and are reaching out to us because the need is there. And we're so thrilled to be able to help support them and getting this going.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing to hear. And, I can't help but notice this theme of data that keeps coming up in all of these different points that I think each of your organizations are really measuring and tracking. And so, I would love to spend a minute just kind of talking about maybe more details around how you've been collecting that data, maybe what data you've been collecting, and how that's really helped to inform some of the success of your program, and maybe what you've shared kind of outwardly. And does anyone want to go first with that? Michelle!
I'm a data nerd, Mary Jane. So data, I just love data. For years, that's what we did, is we used our fourth graders to dive into food waste education and to conduct the audits at their schools. So the schools the students conduct the audits. And like I said, we do that by menu item. What I mean by that is that we're seeing if on the menu today is lasagna or a hamburger or a cheese quesadilla, we're seeing how many pounds of cheese quesadillas are being wasted, how many pounds of hamburgers, how many pounds of lasagna. So it's linked to the menu, not just to what type of food item it is, because these are menu planners. So they want to know specifically, what do students like? They do taste tests and things. They do wonderful programs to introduce new food items and new recipes to students. But we have 200,000 students in our district. 100,000 students in our district. It's a lot of students. So you cannot taste test all of that. So they do want to know. And so that feedback has been very helpful to them. Figuring out, like, we don't know how much is being given out, but we can tell how much is being wasted. We did that for a number of years, and we compared between sizes of schools, days of the week, menu items, all of those things. And by the time we went through 2 or 3 years of this at schools all over the different neighborhoods, different income levels, everything, we saw that the data was pretty much the same. And so that really made us feel comfortable that we had good, solid data.
And I do want to, I want to piggyback on Michelle, because the qualitative data to nutrition services is almost just as helpful. Like she's talking about the menu items. If we see 300 burritos with 1 bite taken out of them, then we have information to give, but we also listen and we watch. So if we see that every single student has a milk on their tray, that is statistically improbable that every student would have chosen that milk, or has a fruit and a vegetable. So we give that feedback where there's training at the nutrition staff level around offer versus serve as well. So all of those things are important.
Yeah, that's really great insight into the qualitative feedback being just as important as the quantitative feedback. Megan, I know that you had also mentioned kind of data in your response as well.
Yeah, so and initially we helped at least one elementary school in 2024 conduct a lunchroom waste audit, and we actually partnered with the Department of Environmental Quality here in North Carolina to do that waste audit with the PTA and the students, and it was a really fun experience, and we were able, as I said, to see firsthand how much of that food was recoverable. So we had, stations for the different food groups being sorted, including what, food scraps going for compost, recoverable foods, liquids, and actual trash. And so being able to see that, take pictures of that, showcase that to our school board, to our superintendent, that was really instrumental in helping to propel forward the conversation about composting and organics diversion in that way at schools, but also for food recovery. So we were able to use that data. And then, with our pilot program for our first 8 schools that we rolled out in the spring, we knew that we wanted to show how much food, how many packages of apple slices were we actually capturing, or bags of baby carrots, or juice cartons. And so we utilized our parent volunteers, our Towards Zero Waste volunteers, even a UNC graduate intern over the summer to help us with that data collection. So we were really, tabulating numbers of how many items came in, and if students were taking them right then and there during the meal, or if they were going on to our share refrigerator and pantry cart for later consumption. So we watched that, and then we saw at the end of the week at all of our schools that all that food was being consumed, and none of it was going into the trash. And only one of our pilot schools had to donate food outside of the school community. So we saw the need, we saw the use for the food, and we were able to tell all of our stakeholders about that. And that led us into being able to roll out phase 2 of our program.
Yeah, that's really awesome to hear. Thanks so much for sharing. Ellen or Eric, do you have anything you'd want to add to that as well?
The way that we collect the data is through our app technology that we use when we're out on the road, doing these food rescues and doing the pickups. And so the data snapshot that we're able to provide to these districts is the kind of more of the macro level, right? What locations are having the highest volume of food donated over the year, or is there certain holidays or closures that are not being handled as well? This year was the first time we were actually able to help out after and during their summer school programs. So I think, my relationship with the person who's at the warehouse level, we're able to see what types of inventory are not even making it from the warehouse, and then what types of food, whether it's dairy, produce, or packaged items per school location, who's not managing that inventory the best. So much more on the how do you change your ordering and distribution practices than the actual what's going on the trays in the day-to-day lunch services.
Yeah, no, these are all such great insights. And, I think that there's a lot of conversations too in the chat of people having questions. And so I'd love to move over to the audience Q&A really quickly just to make sure we touch on that. And unfortunately, there's so much good input there that I don't think we'll be able to get to all of it. But it seems like one of the themes that's kind of reoccurring in there is, related to the food safety piece when it comes to the share tables and also the food recovery programs that you're implementing. And then some other kind of questions within that, how do the share table monitors work? And what do you typically do with the food that's left over? Like how do you find that food at home, or maybe what happens to that? Um, Megan, would you like to kick us off with that?
Sure. So when our schools are interested in potentially being a pilot school, at the moment for our share program, we have an informational meeting, and we're very clear up front about what the roles or the components of the program and what the needs from the school are, so that they go into this with eyes wide open in terms of what their responsibilities are going to be. And we've worked really hard to really narrow down the roles of our program, but it does rely on our school-based staff at our public schools. And so we have roles devised for the share cart supervisors in the cafeteria, the ones that are typically already monitoring breakfast and lunch, helping students with various things and watching behavioral pieces as well. But they're now also watching that collection cart, and they have been educated in terms of what items are recoverable and what are not, as have the students. And so they're keeping an eye on that collection cart, making sure only approved items are coming and going from that cart. And then we have a share stalker role, who the staff member that goes in after breakfast and after lunch and takes any remaining items that haven't been consumed and still are on the collection cart, and takes those items to the share refrigerator and pantry cart, which are outside of the cafeteria. And so that way students are able to access those foods throughout the day and throughout the week. And then our final role for our program is a share cleaner role. And that's the end of the week, once a week job of checking the refrigerator and pantry cart for expiration dates, for freshness, for cleanliness. And so we have a paper trail with that process so that we can keep an eye on a school's program and make sure that only within expiration dated foods are going out to students. And so we've designed that program to be maintained within the school. I think, Mary Jane, I answered all of the components, but let me know if I skipped something.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. I know there was a lot kind of tacked into that one space, and just kind of on maybe the theme of the share tables really quickly. Michelle and Leanne, is there anything you would want to add to that as well from your experience?
Yeah, our share table monitors work a little bit differently. This was the barrier that was identified by Nutrition Services, and so it was really our first priority, making sure that there was someone who was on site all day, that was not a Nutrition Services staff person, that could monitor it, do all the things that Megan just said, right? And they're incented by a small stipend, and we provide a $50 a week stipend for the school year. So we're looking at about an $1,800 payment over a school year. And our share table monitors at some of our schools are assisted by students. We have little rolling carts that are really adorable, and they roll around the cafeteria, and they make sure that kids aren't putting things on them that aren't appropriate, and that students are both taking and receiving from the cart at the same time. That's being done by an adult so that, kids. So, Leanne, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, for the food safety piece, we wrote a very detailed SOP that Nutrition Services approved. And there are cooler bags and the refrigeration, so things are kept cold. And also that monitor, I saw questions about staff or volunteers. It just depends on who has the time. Sometimes it's support staff, and sometimes it's a PTO mom. So all are welcome.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear about that SOP as well. It's a great shout out to that mechanism too. For Ellen and Eric out in Last Mile, I would love to hear if, from the food safety piece, or if there have been kind of any concerns or ways that you've maybe navigated it in the food recovery efforts you all lead.
So definitely we have found that if we're going to help support that food to be used within the school, that, like other teams have mentioned, having some refrigeration that is outside the cafeteria, or at least outside of the kitchen, that's under your control and then has to be monitored, is definitely really the only way to keep that going. But for us, with a lot of the food that we're actually redistributing is outside of the school, we make sure obviously that food is transported safely, that we understand the dates and quality of the food once we're picking up, and then getting it out into the community in a way that it's going to get consumed quickly. Obviously, when we deliver food to partners, it's people that are ServSafe certified and that have gone through our vetting process. But it's about getting it out and distributed as widely and as quickly as possible for us to make sure that the quality and it gets consumed in a timely manner.
And I was just going to add to that, like, we do take care in figuring out where is our partner, where it will be dropped off. Ideally, we try to keep it within the community, to keep food within the community, but also that's that safety piece. If the drive from the school to the donation center is 5-10 minutes, then that keeps the food safe as well. And so we have probably over 200 partners at this point. So we have a pretty big roster of places that we can look and see what partner is going to be the best match for our school in terms of what the school has left over and what the partner needs.
Yeah, that's really a great insight to end on. And we've really run out the clock here. So thank you to all of our presenters. There's still so many more questions in the chat, but I want to make sure that I can pass it back to the Refed team to close this out today. But huge thanks to each of you for presenting today and to our audience.
Yeah, and realizing that we're at the end of our time, I'll just say thank you so much. We will be sending out an email with a recording of the webinar, links to some of the resources, and we'll provide contact information for each presenter. So if you feel like your question wasn't answered, you have a chance to follow up with them, and I'm confident they will all be excited to respond. But for now, have a great rest of your week. Thank you all so much for joining us, and bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.